It's no secret that if you're going to be successful in real estate investing, you have to be able to fund your deals. Whether you're doing the BRRRR method or whether you're fixing and flipping properties for a profit, you got to be able to get to the closing table with money, and you got to have money to rehab the property. And so I personally use Backflip Capital when I need money to get to the closing table and to rehab my properties. I'm in the middle of a flip right now, and I partner with Backflip. It has been the smoothest process of all time. I literally went on their app, applied for the loan. You get pre-approved in less than 48 hours. You can lock in funding in just a few seconds with the touch of a button. Funding takes less than 2 weeks. Hello, that gives you an advantage when you're making offers on properties. And I can't say enough about partnering with Backflip Capital. They're great folks with a fantastic product that everybody listening to this should check out for the next time you go to do a BRRRR deal or fix and flip property. So here's what I want you to do. Go down to the show notes of this show. I've put a link for Backflip Capital in those notes. All you have to do is click the link so that you can download their app and get your next deal funded with Backflip. All right, so I'm here with my guy, Joe Jensen. I'm glad to have him on my podcast because I was on his, the Real Estate Investing School podcast. It wasn't that long ago. It's probably a month or two ago. And
yeah, if that.
So I'm glad I can return the favor, dude. So thanks for being on.
Yeah, it's nice to chat again. It's like an old friend now.
Heck yeah. Joe, man, he's crushed it. I'm excited to dive into your story because we get all like, you have your own podcast. I hear a ton of different stories and a lot of people have done a lot of different things. I think it's cool to hear from you because you've scaled pretty darn fast by, most standards. So I think it's going to be a super valuable episode for everybody to listen. Not only how to get started in real estate, but like, how do we add enough doors to where it's like, oh crap, my life is completely changed and it's a Monday and Joe can do whatever he wants because he learned how to buy a lot of real estate. So thanks again for being on. Give us a little background. Who is Joe Jensen outside of real estate? And then we'll dive into the nitty gritty here in a minute.
Yeah, man. Sweet. Well, I'm stoked to be here. Like I said, it's kind of fun being on this end. All the pressure's on you. I just get to hang out. So, but no, so Joe Jensen, I live in Southern Utah. I'm a big outdoors fanatic. Like I love trail running and hiking and mountain biking and surfing and diving and just playing outdoors makes me very happy. So Utah's a great place for that right now. We just had record-breaking year in snowfall, so I've been snowboarding a lot, and I lived in Hawaii for a while, learned to surf and dive out there. So that's my passion. I got 2 kids, a 4 and 6-year-old, and they eat up most of my time and my heart and my life, and I love it. They're fun. I was just telling you before we were on, that I was just dropping my girl and boy off at school and have a couple hours while they're both gone, so I could jump on this. So it's good, man.
Yeah, we were saying, and anybody listening to this who has kids, you understand. And those of you who are listening who don't have kids, one of these days, should you decide to have kids, you will learn quickly. If you're watching the kids, there's no way you're getting deep work done at the same time. It's just not going to happen. You're just going to get frustrated. So just chalk it up as, hey, for however long I am supposed to be in charge of these little rugrats, no meaningful work's getting done.
Yeah, I heard this phrase once. It's like, raising kids isn't hard. It's just hard to do anything else. You know what I mean? So it's like, you can be with your kid. If you try to do anything else, like keep the house clean or like not kill yourself or like anything else, that's going to be hard. Any work, no. But as long as you give them 100% of your focus, it's pretty good.
Literally right when you got on and I had to walk out for a second, I was going to use the bathroom and one of my kids had just got home from school and like he's wanting to show me his Pokemon cards and like he's wanting to see if I got baseball cards from when I was a kid that I can give him to go trade at school. I'm like, bro, what do you do? Like, relax.
Yeah, in 1 hour.
Yeah. Yeah, just let me finish this first. But they're the greatest thing ever. So, man, that's awesome. I'm always jealous of people who like are the adventurous outdoors folks. I love outdoors in a different sense. Like, I love playing sports, but not extreme sports. Like I love basketball, golf, tennis. I hunt a lot here in the Southeast, but nice. I did not grow up like surfing. I didn't grow up on slopes, none of that. And so to like get on top of a mountain and ride it down on skis or a snowboard, I'll do it, but we're going to be on the bunny slopes, I think is what they call it. Like, I don't know. I don't know. I got to get into more of the extreme stuff. I did a Spartan race a couple weeks ago. Like that was
Love
as
those.
extreme as I want to get. Like I hate heights. And so me and my brother-in-laws did it. I'd never done one. It was fine. Like physically I was fine. But when I'm having to climb up all this stuff and I look down, I'm like, bro, if I fall, it's a broken neck. Like broken.
Yeah.
That's all there is to it.
Spartan's got some good ones, man. I've had some fun Spartan races. Those are that's cool. You did one though. You
Yeah.
liked it.
Yeah, it was fun. It was fun.
Love it.
I just didn't like the heights. So anyways, well, that's cool. So back to you and your story. Like, I think it's cool that you spent a decade doing door-to-door sales before you ever really like started dabbling. I guess you probably started dabbling in real estate towards the end of it, but you know, what does your journey with work look like with door-to-door sales? And for those of y'all who've never done door-to-door sales, it's not easy whatsoever.
Yeah, man. There's raising kids is hard, and the next to that is door-to-door sales. Those are probably two the hardest things in the world, at least that I've done personally. So there's probably a lot harder stuff out there. But door-to-door, it's a grind, man. It's a mind F. Like, you have to learn to manage your emotions in a real powerful way and manage your expectations and really be in control of your head, which is really cool. I learned a lot doing that, but I hated it. I didn't enjoy the day-to-day work. I didn't enjoy my life. It was sacrifice now so I could have something better later, which there's a time and a place for that, right?
100%.
And so as far as real estate, I bought my first place before I got into door-to-door. I was like 23, 24. I was getting ready to get married, and I wanted to get into real estate. I'd seen my dad do some, and I didn't really understand what it was or what he did. But I was like, I got to get into real estate. I have to do something, or I'm never going to do it. I got to do something. And this is 2009. So like, I didn't know like the whole world was like blowing up in that moment, but because I knew nothing about real estate or the economy. I was just a kid, just graduating college, hadn't even graduated yet, like just oblivious to, macro and microeconomics in any way, shape, or form. Anyway, so literally there's a house for sale a street or two down from my parents where I was living. And I just bought it on like an FHA loan. It was like $3,000 out of pocket. My dad helped me. It was just like this super like low key, thing. And I didn't even live in it because I couldn't afford the mortgage. Like I tried to live in it, but then I was like, this isn't going to work. You know what I mean? I can't flip this bill. And so that didn't last long. And yeah, anyway, I still own that property today, and it's got, I've got hundreds of thousands of dollars in equity in it, and it cash flows to this day. And, this was, a long time ago. So anyway, that was my first step into it. And then I started working, doing door to door, started making pretty good money. And I bought like one or two more, and then ended up selling one because I could make some money, and I got distracted. I didn't understand what my real goal was with cash flow. And then I just got so focused on making money that I spent the next like 8 years after that just knocking doors and making money. Like, oh, I'm going to build up something someday. And I wish I had bought more along the way. Like I said, I dabbled at the beginning, didn't know what I was doing, had no idea how to run like numbers on a property or why a property's good or bad. I had no clue about anything. Bought a couple, and then didn't really do anything for like 7 years. Wow. And then when I went through my divorce, and I was like, I don't have the time to run big sales teams and do all this stuff anymore. I was like, I'm a full-time dad now, at least half the time. And so I'm like, okay, I got to pivot. What am I going to do? And I was like, I looked around for a while, and I thought, man, real estate is something I always loved. I'm going to figure it out, and I'm just going to retire right now instead of getting into another career, because I thought about getting into tech or software, all these things. It's like, I'm not going to do another career. I'm just going to figure out real estate, retire right now. I was 36 when I got divorced, 35, something like that. I'm like, I'm just going to retire now. I'm going to do it through real estate. I'm going to figure it out. And I spent about 2 years just engulfing everything I could understand about finance. Was a big part of the game for me. Like, I needed to understand how to use debt wisely, how to leverage debt correctly, how to get it, what was I going to do with my properties? I had a lot of equity in my properties, right? Because it had been 8 or 10 years. And I was like, okay, these are my nest egg. This is everything I built, over a decade of work. I don't want to botch this and be like, oh shiz, I got to go back to the doors for another 10 years, So I was like, I have to figure this out. So anyway, long story short, dove in for about 2 years, of just like heavy involvement, learning everything I could, and then just sprinted and went from like 5 doors to like 34. I say units because a lot of mine aren't even doors, they're just like land. But anyway, about 34 units is what I say, of property that I can rent out. And the cool thing is I was able to replace my income. I don't have to work anymore. My kids are good. They have a house, car, food, life. I can travel. I can do everything I want, not luxuriously, but I got that freedom that I wanted. And I was able to pivot so that right now when my kids are super young, it's like, dude, I'll just be like, a free dad. And then I can go like make crazy money, when they're in school and stuff later.
That's awesome, dude. I think one of the things you said that I've had this conversation with others before is you didn't understand or you didn't have a goal. Like, what were you even trying to accomplish?
Yeah.
When you bought the first couple, and then you're like, oh, I'm just going to go work. And then when you realize, okay, this is what I'm trying to do. Let me write this down and then work backwards from there. It's very hard to, whether it's investing in real estate, building a business, buying stocks, if you're just doing it blindly without, hey, this is what I'm doing it for, you'll never know if you've achieved what you're trying to achieve because you don't have anything you're trying to achieve. And
well, so I had time frames tied to it, right? I was like, I gave myself a year. I was like, dude, if you can't replace your income in the year, like you got to go back to work. Like, so I had a time frame, I had an exact number I had to hit. I had like all the goals, like setting strategies they tell you. I wasn't purposely trying to accomplish those. That was just the necessity of the reality. So all the things had to line up for it to work. And I mean, I guess I've been setting goals like for a decade, so I like knew it pretty intimately. But it was like, yeah, I had a time frame, I had exact amount, every piece lined up, and it was like, go. And I got more done in that year than I did the previous 10. You know what I mean? It's like, golly, if I had stayed focused and knew what I needed, like you're saying at the beginning, it'd been a different story.
What does that feel like? Because I still have the safety net of a W-2, and a lot of people do. And I encourage people oftentimes, stick with your W-2 if you don't absolutely hate it. But there have been times, I'll say this tactfully, not that I've wanted to, because I don't really want to, because I got a whole family I'm supporting. I mean, you get it. But there's been times where I have wondered, what does the feeling that Joe felt, where he's like, all right, I'm cutting the cord on this guaranteed income, and I'm going to figure it out. I mean, that's got to be an exhilarating feeling.
Yeah, well, I mean, for me, it's a little different though, because so when I was doing door-to-door sales, it was straight commission, baby. Like you eat what you kill. Like I hadn't had guaranteed money ever. Like I'd never had a W-2. You know what I mean? I was like a roofer and a server and some stupid stuff through college. But I got into sales pretty young, and so it was, if you don't sell, you don't make money. That's it. So I was always aware of that life, and so it wasn't that strange to me. And I was in seasonal work on top of that. So it was like, hey, you work half the year, you take half the year off. You work half the year, you take half the year off. And so I already knew how to budget it. I already knew how to like not spend all my money that I was making because I had to like get through the next part of the season. And so it really wasn't an odd transition for me, because I was already in that deep commissioned world already. And so now it's just finding a way for the commissions to keep paying even when I stop working.
Yeah. And that's the exhilarating part. And you've obviously done it. And you look back and you're probably like, you know what? That was a pretty good decision. So you get out and you dive into real estate all in. What does that look like? Is it all rentals? Are you having to flip or wholesale some to generate some income? How do you go from those, 3-4 properties to now we have 34 units?
Yeah, man. So when I was first looking into real estate, I thought I was trying to replace my commission job. I was like, okay, well, how can I go and make money? I'll go do a flip, or I'll look into wholesale. So I started studying all of it, right? I studied all of it. And the more I got into it, it's just like, there's this thing that is this principle. So everybody listening, write this down: knowledge acquisition. Okay. The knowledge acquisition, when you're going to go learn something new, you're going to take a lot of time to learn this new skill, right? And so it's not only about property acquisition, but it was knowledge acquisition. It's like, am I going to go learn a whole new trade like software or tech sales or whatever that I could do remotely because I couldn't do my door-to-door things? Like, am I going to learn a whole new trade? I'm like, I don't want to spend that time and effort learning something that's not going to get me where I want to go necessarily. And so I was like, I'm going to learn real estate. And as I got into it, I was like, I didn't want to learn flipping. I didn't want to learn wholesaling because those things are commissioned sales. That's all it is. You're grinding. You put the work in, you get an exit, you make your money, you're back broke again. The next day, it's like, hey, you have money in your bank, but you have no income tomorrow.
Yep.
And so it's the hamster wheel, right? And I wasn't interested in that. I'd done that for a decade, and it was easier to go sell, some alarms or solar or whatever I was selling at the time than it was to, flip homes, a whole new industry I didn't learn. So anyway, long story short, I focused on cash flow is what I settled on. After studying all the different ways you could do real estate, I realized what was going to help me and set me free was cash flow. And so I went really, really focused on that. And then I said, okay, well, once I hit these different tiers of the cash flow goals, maybe then I'll back up and like go do some cool flips and make some big money. And then it's just play money at that point. Because if my lifestyle is covered by my cash flow and I go do a flip and make 20, 50, 100 grand, it's like, let's go, dude. I can go do that, whatever I want with that money. So I've got a multi-level goals for my real estate career, and I'm still in the cash flow building stage. And so, some of those other ideas and big exits and syndications and funds where you can bring it in and then 5 years, you got $1 million windfall at the end. I've got all that in mind, but it's like, not right now. Put the blinders on and be where you're at.
That's smart that you stay disciplined and do that. I invest in a couple funds and I'm glad I did. I'll get a great return. I already get some distributions, but it's illiquid. It is what it is. You tie it up and for a while you're not getting your money back. Whereas if you're trying to create, some separation from, bills that are coming in by being covered from assets, you're going to have to buy those cash flowing real estate or cash flowing pieces of real estate. And the fact that you've stayed focused and done that is huge because a lot of people chase the shiny object, right? The shiny object syndrome. It's what's everybody talking about? Oh, the short-term rental here or fund here, syndication here. And you're like, no, I have one focus right now to give me what I need in my life. And I think that's powerful that you've been able to stay focused on that. So, cash flow has obviously been number one for you. How did you go about finding that? You gotta choose a market to find those deals in. What was that journey like for you?
Yeah, that was funny. So one note on what you were just saying is like, making money in real estate is only hard because there's too many ways to make money in real estate. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, you can get so distracted, and it really is a real thing. And I have tons of students the same way. They're like, you get pulled 100 different directions. So you got to get real clear on what your goals are. And one thing I've done along the way is I've set principles for myself or rules where it's like, okay, this has to fit this principle, this rule. And one currently is like, I need to be in control of the exit of the asset. And that's where syndications doesn't fit my rules right now for my current goals. For other people, when you're working full time, syndications are awesome. When you don't have the bandwidth or the knowledge to do real estate, I don't know where you can put your money better than that. It's a lot better than the stock market and junk like that. You know what I mean? Like, syndications are awesome for certain people. For me, it doesn't align with my current principles of investing. And so you got to have current investing principles that you live up to so you don't get distracted. Which I'm doing right now. Because the question though, what was the question? I forgot.
No, that's great. By the way, that's fantastic advice there. Just choosing the market to capitalize on those cash flowing assets.
So it shows me. So my dad always told me, he's old school, right? And he's like, don't buy out of your farming area. And your farming area is something you can drive to within an hour or two, maybe, if that, it's like, buy locally, stay close. That's what that's what you can handle. So I always thought about that. I always tried to do that. And that's why I'm from Utah, and I only bought in Utah. That's where all my beginner properties were from. And then I was like, hey, I gotta get free. I gotta get my cash flow. And so I started running numbers. I learned how to do cash on cash return. I learned how to like vet out deals. And I created this like great calculator. I call it the Joe's Asset Analyzer. And like, in my humble opinion, it's the best one out there. And so like, it was really, really in depth. And like, I learned how to like feel comfortable buying something. And I'm running all these properties, and I'm like, that won't work. That won't work. That won't work. That won't work. Nothing's going to make it through my calculator. I'm like, what am I going to do? How am I going to hit these goals? Because I need to put this money into, and I knew how much money I had. I went and refinanced my house, pulled out all my, the cash out refinance I could, because I made the mistake of paying off my home, which we can get into why that's a mistake later if you want to. But yeah. I made that mistake anyway. But luckily, I had hundreds of thousands of dollars in equity. And that's where I funded all this. I say, okay, I'm pulling out all this money from my equity and my property, and I have this much money to get this much cash flow in this amount of time. And that's what I always tell students. I'm like, you got to do the trifecta. Like, what's your goal? What's your time frame? And what are your resources? And if you overlap those, that will determine your strategy. So when you're asking, well, how did I pick my markets? Well, I couldn't make Utah work. And I didn't have the bandwidth to go doing the super creative stuff and building like tiny home parks and adding apartment buildings behind the lot. I have a buddy, Brody Fawcett, who started the real estate investing school, and he does this really creative stuff, right? And I'm like, dude, I don't have the bandwidth or the knowledge to do that. I'm working 3 or 4 hours a day. I'm raising my kids. That's my focus. And that only happens once. I'm not going to get distracted from that. So I put a cap on my work hours too, which made it real hard to go ham, because I'm like, well, you can only work 3 or 4 hours a day, bro. And that's probably only every other week, because the other week you're full time. And so it's like, I had a real strict time frame of how much bandwidth I could do. So I couldn't take on big projects. So anyway, I started analyzing stuff all over the country and found some places that worked, where the cash flow numbers came in. And it was just kind of where I had connections. I had a buddy in one state, and he bought some. Like, how does that work? Like, you're cash flowing? Nothing, none of the numbers work for me. He's like, well, you're in Utah. Like, look at here. I was like, oh, okay. And then I had a buddy selling, a friend of mine selling a house in like upstate New York, which I'm like, you don't buy in New York, bad landlord laws, blah, blah, blah. But the numbers worked. And I was like, all right. And so my constraints determined my strategy, which ended up determining my markets. Even though they weren't necessarily the best, ideal, perfect scenario, but they helped me accomplish what I was trying to do. And I was like, okay, I have this rule. If any of my students have heard me say this 100 times, I'm like, it's 1 of 100. When you go buy a property, don't think it's the end of the world or this big, long, like eternal marriage commitment. Like, it's 1 of 100, dude. You're going to buy this property. You don't like it. You'll sell it. You'll buy another one. You'll buy another one. So that kind of released the fear of like, stay in your farming area. Don't leave your backyard. I was like, I'll go buy anything, anywhere if the numbers work and I can get freedom. And once I have my freedom, I can go pivot those and I can sell that portfolio for a better market in a better area now that I don't need as much cash flow because I've got enough. And so, like I said, I have this multi-stage idea of where I'm going to go with it all. But stage 1 was just make enough money to be free. And then I can start to deciding what I want to do with my portfolio.
When I set out on my real estate journey 5 years ago, I wasn't exactly sure what the outcome was going to be, but I knew based on history that people who had bought this asset and held it over time, it had completely changed their lives. It had given them life-changing wealth. It had given them time freedom, and it had given them financial freedom. And I knew that I wanted that for myself and my family. Fast forward from 2018 to today, and it has completely changed our lives. It has completely changed my family tree because I said yes. I took that step forward into buying this asset that has proven itself time and time again for centuries. And so if you're still on the sidelines and you have yet to start buying real estate, or maybe you have a few properties, but you've ran into roadblocks and you haven't been able to scale and add the volume you needed to have that huge impact on your life, then I want to invite you into our Rental Academy community, where you're going to be linked up with investors all across the country. You're going to have coaching multiple times a week from myself and our entire panel of world-class coaches. You're going to be given all the knowledge and know-how that you need to be successful in real estate, the calculators, the templates, the guides, the lending partners, the insurance partners, the LLC partners, all of it. We're going to teach you everything you need to know to be successful in real estate investing, and then we're going to be there with you along the journey, hold your hand, and guide you so that you can have the opportunity to reach and achieve financial freedom like I and so many of our students and people across the country have. So when you're ready to say yes, text the word WIN, W-I-N, to 871-861-9264. Set up a time to chat with myself or somebody on our team so that we can go on this journey with you and help you achieve the life of your dreams. I love it. Where, and you don't have to give us exact places, but a lot of people wonder, well, where can I buy in the country that you can find good deals? Because you got people in Utah. I mean, like you say, you're not going to find cash flow in Utah. Maybe you could have found Airbnbs a couple of years ago, or California.
Mm-hmm.
What's kind of been just regions wise where you
Sure.
found?
Well, and I'll say you can do it anywhere. You just got some places you got to get more creative. And if you're in the California, the Utah, like the high appreciation states, now Texas used to be like the cash flow place, and now it's like the appreciation place. But you just got to get more creative and see things that other people aren't seeing. But you can do it anywhere, but it depends on how much bandwidth. But yeah, man, if you want to make money, just go to the small towns. So that's the rule you're not supposed to do that nobody wants to do. I was like, I'll just go to the small towns, little butthole cities all over the country where things are dirt cheap, and I'll just do that. So, really anywhere in the Midwest, but it really doesn't even matter. Like, it could be any state. If you go find the small towns where people aren't buying, there aren't competitive. That was another thing. We're talking 2021. Do you realize how competitive it was in that moment? It was like you had to waive inspection, waive appraisal, waive every right you have to making sure you're not like hurting yourself just to get a property under contract. Like, it was insanely competitive.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm not doing that, dude. Like, that's too risky. But guess what? In the middle of nowhere, there's no competition because nobody's buying. So I could actually get things under contract, do an inspection. I didn't have 40 other offers I'm competing with. And if it worked out, then I could go through with it. And so, that doesn't necessarily have to be state specific, but you got to run the numbers. And but that can give you an edge that could work. But again, it's not, one second, let me take a drink here. Again, it's not going to accomplish all the goals of real estate, because the cool thing about real estate is there's cash flow, right? And that's what we're talking about. But the real money is also made from a pre-equity increase. So equity increase can come from rehabbing, flipping, just holding 10 years. It can happen from markets going up. So the equity increase, the appreciation is where the real wealth is made. You know what I mean? And then you've also got your tax advantages. You're not getting most of that if you go buy a piece of crap in some small town. It's already worth not very much. So even if it doubled in value, that's not going to make you rich. And you're not getting a big tax cut because there's not that much on your loan. Like, you're losing most of the benefit and you're just getting the cash flow. But I was like, hey, blinders on. This is my goal. I can pivot for that later. I don't know if that's the best strategy for everybody. In fact, I know it's not the best strategy for some people. You know what I mean? If you still got your job and you
needed it to.
It is what I needed. And I was so focused on that. That's what I did. So for some people, that can be a cool way to do it. But I've got students who are like doctors and physicians, and they just started their practice. They're going to be doing that for the next 30 years. I'm like, you don't need to replace cash flow. Like, no one cares about that in your boat. Like, you need to be going and just building equity increase plays where, you're going to make real wealth over time. So I say cash flow sets you free and equity increase makes you wealthy.
Yep.
And you got to know kind of what you're doing.
I love it. What lead generation look like for you? How were you generating these leads? Were you just hopping on Zillow, or did you have some cold calling? What that look like?
Yeah, man. No. So one thing I didn't want to do, and again, I might in the future, I didn't want to run a business. Okay. I was like, I don't have the time. I don't have the bandwidth. I don't have the patience. I don't even know where the heck I'm living next week. Like, things are just crazy in my life. I'm like, all I know is I'm going to keep my kids cool and happy and loving me, and like make sure that doesn't slip during all this craziness. But I did not have time to start a business. So I wasn't going to be starting lead funnels and running all this deep stuff. So it was just me like reaching out to wholesalers, Facebook, Zillow, reaching out to agents, any friends I know, and I've bought it off of, all of them. So I've had real estate agents. I've just straight up bought from real estate agents giving me on market and off market deals. And like, newsflash, guys, real estate agents can give you off market deals. Like, a lot of time we think you can't do that. Like, real estate agents are awesome. Yeah. And one thing I mentioned on a post a while back was like, the cool thing I didn't know about before I went professional with real estate is like, everybody works for free. Yeah. Like the real estate agent works for free. I don't pay them. Comes from the seller. The loan officer works for free until the loan goes down. Then you pay him quite a bit. But it's like, but he's doing all the pre-work for free. So only if there's a deal. The property management, they don't make money unless someone pays rent. I'm like, dude, everybody works for free in this industry.
What a great point.
Like, right? Like, I don't need to go write paychecks and build a team and run a business and have overhead. And I'm like, dude, I'm trying to pay for my mortgage and like life. I'm not trying to pay overhead on a business right now. which there's a place for that. And that's where you're going to actually grow real wealth. It just wasn't right where I was. But anyway, so yeah, so I bought it from everybody, from agents, wholesalers, friends, just anything that was out there. Zillow. I mean, I got some land on probate sale on Zillow, just reaching out to like whatever I could afford and whatever made sense,
I love it. I love it. I mean, essentially what you're saying there is network, network, stick yourself out there, meet these people. And I tell my students all the time, like, just put yourself out there, call agents, join the Facebook group, go to the meetups, join wholesalers lists. And if you do those things over time, leads are going to start generating. I get calls, I've been in the game for a little while now, but I'll get calls from contractors, locksmiths, realtors, you name it. Hey, I saw this property, figured you might be interested in it. And it's fantastic. But I've also done, like you said, bought it off Zillow, saw it. The last property I bought, it was listed for, I think, 140. I offered 100. They countered at 105. Great deal. Great. So it's just, you got to, and I'm like you, I didn't want to set up a business. I didn't want to hire VAs. I didn't want to CRM, and I'm going through and all this stuff. And there is a way to be able to generate leads without having to spend all of your time or money or energy doing it. And I think that's pretty powerful. So
yeah, and I'd say this, like I had this kind of a theme ended up being my theme of the year, unintentionally, but it's just action leads to opportunities. So you just got to be taking action, like, because I saw things happen. Like I bought this one little property that I didn't even really want. It was a friend of mine. She was selling it really cheap. And I was like, all right, me and a buddy went on it on a partner deal. And we're like, all right, let's give it a shot. And this is like when I was just starting to, like, before I'd even decided I was going to go hard in real estate. It was just kind of like a dabble still. But I ended up trying to find a property manager for that property. And the property manager was not working out very well, not responsive and stuff. But she ended up having some property for sale. And I was like, okay. And the numbers worked. So I ended up buying some property from that property manager and self-managing all of it. But it was funny because I bought that one, it led me to buy another. And then I had a similar thing happen with one property. I had to get some inspection done from the city. So the city calls me like, hey, we need this inspection done. I'm like, all right, cool. And they're like, we need someone, like, when are you going to be there? I'm like, well, I'm not going to be there. I'm a remote investor. And they're like, well, no, you have to have like a local person on the ground here. You can't just do this on your own. And I'm like, well, okay, like, do you know anybody? I was like, I don't have anybody. And they were like, oh yeah, there's this guy, he's awesome. And so I hit up that guy and he's like, oh yeah, I'll take care of all your stuff, like this is what I do. And I'm like, dude, lifesaver, thanks city. He's like, oh, in fact, like I probably mentioned to him like, hey, if you know any deals, let me know, like say, mention that to everybody. He's like, oh yeah, there's this other one I property manage for, and I think she's going to let it go. She's kind of getting out of the game. Her husband died, and she's kind of just like getting rid of her portfolio. Hit me up. I was like, this is the best deal I'd had in a while. And that's the one I have under contract right now, is this off-market deal from a property manager the city told me about because I needed to get an inspection done, which again, all goes back to action. If I wasn't buying, if I didn't own it, if I wasn't getting my inspections, working with the city, doing all these action items, it wouldn't have led me to the connection to get that next deal. You know what I mean? Wow. And so they all kind of piggyback off each other in a lot of ways. And
you're able to do this out of state. I think there's this hold up in a lot of people's mind that, oh, I got to buy where I live. And you're crushing that myth right now. What do you think is essential for somebody who lives in an expensive area? They're not finding any deals. They want to go buy in these smaller areas. What do you think they need to do to be successful?
Again, you got to know what your goal is and why you're doing it. Are you trying to build appreciation? You're trying to build equity? Are you doing like, just a cash flow play? Like, you got to know what your goal and your time frame and your resources are. Your goal, your time frame, your resources. If you don't know that, then none of the answers are going to come to make any sense, because they're answering what question? You know what I mean? So no answer makes sense unless you know the question. And the question is, how do you achieve your goal with your current resources in your current time frame, right? And so, the biggest thing though, I would say, for out of state investing, one, I just start if you do have any resource contact there, anybody, you know what I mean? Like if you have somebody on the ground that can help out, that's awesome. If not, maybe just buy cheap enough that it goes south. You're not going to screw yourself and get your feet wet in the market. Again, it's one of 100. If you go start a market, you buy something, it ends up being a home run and everything falls into place and it's easy to get renters in there and the city's cool to work with. And you're like, dude, this is awesome. Then go buy another one. You go buy something and then it's like, this is a shit show. The city's a pain in the ass. There's all of these like expenses I didn't know about. It was a pain to get a renter in there. They're not really paying rent. Exit. It's not the end of the world. It's one of 100. So that was literally what I did. And you're like, how do I pick my markets? I was like, I just started buying in markets and I said, we'll see how it works out, which sounds crazy, but I was buying cheap stuff. I'm not buying $500,000 homes and rolling the dice on it. I'm buying cheap stuff to see how it works. And then depending on that, I can pivot and adjust or go harder or whatever I need to do. And again, there's 1,000 ways to skin a cat. That's just what I ended up doing.
Yeah. What class property are you buying normally? Like B, C, D?
Yeah. So when people talk about diversification of funds, like, oh, you should diversify your investments. My version of diversifying investments is A class real estate, B class real estate, C class real estate. Yeah. So like, that's how I diversified. So I would say the bulk of mine though is in C class properties, just because there's a lot of advantages to them. And so I could kind of get into that, but I'd say the bulk is just C class properties. But I do have some good A class and a couple B class as well. You do have to be diversified in that. I mean, you don't have to, but I think it's a good idea to be diversified in that. But again, for one A class, you can buy 2 B class, or 2 B class, you can buy 10 C class. And so it's like that diversification of your funds, you're going to have more C class just because they're cheaper. Even if you put the same amount of money into each class, you're going to end up more with the cheapest one if you put the same amount of money in, right?
Yep, for sure. And for those of y'all listening who don't know what the different classes are, quick breakdown. A's like luxury, think really nice area. B's like right below that. C class is, like, I don't know, hospitality workers, maybe not a ton of amenities around, maybe higher crime, but it's not really violent. This is how I rate them anyways. And then D is kind of like that. Maybe dangerous area, high violent crime. And so what you'll see a lot of investors in the long-term rental space, the sweet spot tends to be in that B to C class area, especially, C, because you can still get cash flow. Like you can cash flow in those properties, but then also they're in areas that are still appreciating over time as well. So, like Joe said, there's no right or wrong way to do it. And it's good to diversify. I have, I've had 2 that are in A class areas, and then I probably got, 4 in B class, and the rest of mine are in C class. And I've got close to mine in D class before, but I pulled the trigger I didn't pull the trigger because what I learned is, maintenance and vacancies tend to be a lot higher. And so I was running my numbers underwriting, and I was running numbers like a C class neighborhood. And then I call the property manager and they're like, whoa, no, that's not right. They're like, maintenance is going to be X amount more and vacancy is going to be X amount more. And I was like, well, that's a learning. And I'd already got inspections done on all of these homes, spent like $3,500. And thank God I got out in time because it wasn't going to be a good deal. But anyways, that's just kind of a breakdown of, the different property classes.
Yeah. And when you mentioned property managers, I want to mention that because really you said, well, what's the key to investing out of state? Now, this is my take. Any property managers listening out there, I apologize in advance. Most property managers are the worst, right? It's hard to find a good property manager. Like they're distracted. They don't get paid a lot. You're not no one's going to care about your property as much as you do. Right? No one's going to care about your rent coming in as much as you do. Like it's not anybody's priority, even if it's their job, right? As compared to how big of a deal it is to you. Anyway, so it's really hard to find a good property manager. But if you can find a good property manager, that is the MVP of out-of-state investing. That's it. That's what you need. They know the market. They're like, we're not going to run your property, Jaron, in this neighborhood because that's D-class and we don't want the headache. So if a property manager refuses to manage property in that area, you don't want to buy in that area. That's a good sign, right? Listen to them. Yeah. And so it's like, if you have a good property manager, that solves 90% of your out-of-state investing problems. Right there.
And they'll do everything for you pretty much. Like they have all the connections. My property managers, they do rehab. Now, not if I'm going to flip a property, but if I have buying a distressed property that needs a little bit of love, they have contractors. They'll manage the project. Yeah. I have it set to where if it's a repair under $500, don't call me. That's just what I've set it at. And
Hmm.
so I got an email today. Hey, it's $850 to replace some plumbing, something, something. And I had to approve it. But outside of that, dude, I don't hear much, if
It's
renewals
the
are coming
best.
up or we got an eviction, but outside of that, you're right. It is a game changer when you
Well, and
find.
they'll let you know, like, you can just, hey, how much would this rent for? And they know because they're renting out 20 of them. They're like, oh, that 3-bed, 2-bath in that neighborhood is going to rent for this. So now you can run your numbers because you actually know rents on it.
Yep.
And you're like, would you manage that? They're like, yes, no, like, avoid this area. Oh, we've got this, we have someone selling a property. You can get deals from your property managers. Like, so anyway, a good property manager is priceless. And they can, like I say, do so much from acquisition to even managing. They solve a lot of problems the whole way out.
That's genius. Yeah, and they know everybody too. It's like if you
Right.
need an attorney, they got you. Need another realtor, they got. I mean, it's they are a hack that not enough people are using to make your life, whether you're local or out of state. A lot of
I
mine
don't pay my property manager to collect rent every month.
exactly.
That's not, I'm like, I used to think that. I'm like, well, that's expensive. Like, I don't want to do that. That's turnkey, That's not what I pay them for. I pay them for them as a resource like that to help me acquire, to know the area, to manage, some of the headaches as well. But, honestly, dude, I do a lot of property management myself, and it can be easier to deal with tenants than it is dealing with property management companies sometimes.
Yeah, you get a bad one.
But and that's what I say. But when it comes, I don't pay them to property manage. I pay them to be my knowledge, my foot on the ground, my resource, my connection for all of the things like uninvolved with the actual, like, hey, will you pay your rent this month? You know what I mean? They do that as well, but that's not why I pay them.
Yeah, that's good stuff. So if I'm listening to this episode, I know one of my questions is, all right, you got 34 units. How do we fund all of these? What does it look like to get these deals done at this scale?
Yeah. So again, everybody's situation's a little different. I had a couple $100,000 from pulling out money from my current stuff. That gave me a huge leg up to get started. And then I bought really cheap.
So you're doing like traditional 20% down on DSCR loans, or are you doing under your personal name with 30
Yeah.
years?
So first I started out with conventional loans, you know what I mean? And those, had to be, 20% down and stuff. And then started switching to, not really switching, but at the same time in different places for some of the cheaper ones. I just started doing some local credit unions, and they do, whatever DSCR type loan that they offer. And I was able to kind of pull some stuff, do a little bit of some burrs on some, like, kind of accidental, where it's like, oh, I bought it cash because it was cheap, and then it needed some repairs, so I fixed it up, and then I put the debt on it. And I was like, oh, I pulled out like most of my money back out. That was cool. That wasn't the goal, that wasn't the plan, but it ended up working out. So I kind of burred a couple of them. Not a full perfect burr where you're walking away with money or anything, but I ended up burning a couple of them, which definitely recycled the money so it could go further. Did get them 20% downs. I've done partner deals now recently too. After I started running the podcast with the real estate investing school, and I started, buying a bunch, everybody in my world just saw like, oh, dude, you're the guy now that knows real estate, all my friends and family and stuff. And people are like, where can I park some money? Where can I park some money? So I've started doing partner deals, which that kind of is expanding things as well. And then some I just bought, cash. I've been buying some dirt and different things like that, just cheap stuff. And so some I just bought on their own. So the original thing though is the cash out refinance, pulling out the equity of what I had, and then just buying low and then bringing in partners.
Yeah, that's a solid way to do it. You hear, and I talk about it a lot, buying real estate with little to none of your money down. And it's fantastic because you can add a lot of units and your cash on cash is significantly higher. And it's how I built a lot of my portfolio. But when you do that, oftentimes you're cutting into cash flow, when you end up,
for sure,
taking more money out and you're making the property worth more, which means the loan's more. Whereas if you just buy it 20% down, and then rent it out, generally your cash flow is going to be a lot higher than doing something like the burn method. And so it's like you said, there's more than one way to skin a cat. And so while somebody's may be, hey, how can I reuse this amount of money over and over and over again? And I don't care about a ton of cash flow. Or it may be, hey, I need to put some money into this so that my cash flow is high enough to make a dent into my living expenses. And there's not a right or wrong way. It's just, where are you at in life? What are you
Hmm.
trying to accomplish in what amount of time?
Exactly. Yeah. It's like, well, what are your goals? You know what I mean? And so that'll determine if you've only got this much money and you need this much cash flow, but you've got some time. It's like you might have to go burr. You might have to recycle that money because that's all the money you have. You're like, oh, you spent a decade, you saved up 200 grand. And that's all the money. It's never going to be replaced. It's like you got to recycle that baby. You know what I mean? But if you're making 200 or 300 grand a year and just going hard and you got money coming in, it's like just 20% downs, baby. Just go easy. Just buy what's available and like don't overcomplicate it. Like I love what you do where it's like, but it takes more bandwidth where you're buying a place, you're rehabbing a place, you're refinancing it. There's a little more risk and speculation of
Yep.
what's rates going to look like in 6 months from now. You've got, that's why you have good lenders in your back pocket though.
Exactly.
But it's a little more involved than
It
just
definitely is.
buying a turnkey at 20% down. It's
Yeah.
not complicated. Like my strategy is so boring and like easy because I wasn't going to commit the time and bandwidth to do anything else. And so this is where I narrowed down on, but that's different for everybody.
Yeah. And it's worked for you, man. You got more, I'm sure you want to accomplish in the future.
Sure.
But as far as what you've set out to do, being able to replace that income so you can be there for your kids. I mean, bro, you did it.
Yeah, it's an amazing thing when you can make six figures without having to even show up and you could choose how you just spend every single hour of your day. Like that's an amazing thing. You know what I mean? The funny thing is like that was always the goal eventually, but I kind of had this like life crisis of going through this big divorce and all this stuff. And it kind of sped up that whole process and was like, oh, I guess I'll do it now instead of 10 years from now. And I'm like, well, that's good. I have this mantra I say every day that all people and circumstances are my allies. All people and circumstances are my allies. And if I make them so. And so it's like, well, okay, this circumstance might not have been what I would have designed, but how can I make it my ally? And it's like, man, it's definitely things come out on top if you look at it that way.
Wow. Dude, that's powerful. Well, man, this has been fantastic. So much information. I know the listeners are going to take a lot of ways, from this entire episode. So thanks for being on. Where can they get a hold of you? Where's the best place to find you?
Yeah, the easiest way is just my website. If you go to www.josephf, as in freedom, Jensen, so josephfjensen.com. It's just a link to my link tree, and you'll be able to see my personal Instagram, my real estate Instagram, the podcasts I host, some just everything that I'm doing, I got going on basically. So josephfjensen.com.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Well, you guys definitely go check it out. He's a great dude. Like I said, he had me on his podcast, and it's a fantastic podcast. And I was glad I was able to return the favor. And I know the listeners are going to get a ton out of this. So all you listeners, share this with a friend or two. I know this is going to be able to help somebody who, maybe they can't figure out, okay, what is my why? What is my goal here? You can sit here and listen to Joe's story and say, you know what? I decided what I needed, what I wanted in life, put a plan together, put the blinders on, and made it happen. So share this with somebody, and then take a screenshot of you listening to this and tag myself at Finance Cowboy and Joe on Instagram. I think he's at Joseph F. Jensen. And let us know you listen. We'd love to both thank you personally and, interact with you. So anyways, Joe, thanks for being on, man. Until next time, we'll talk soon.
Thanks, man. It's been a pleasure.